What's happening, ladies and gentlemen? My name's Austin, and thanks for tuning in again to the DevvE Weekly Roundup. And joining me, as always, Mr. Tom Anderson. Tom, is it the shadow, or are you sporting a beard? What do you got going on there, man?
So throughout my life, I sometimes get a little bit of this stubble.
I like it.
I may keep it for a bit, but we'll see.
Bull market beard. I'm calling it now. Hashtag it, friends. All right, cool. So what do you want to dive into today, Tom? What can we peek at?
So I think the most important thing that we're working on really kind of short term, and that could have the most impact to DevvE and FIAS utility and just in general kind of growth across the board, is our S2 business. So our business in which other people can run their blockchain applications on the DevvX platform. So I thought that'd be a good topic for today.
Yeah, definitely. And so I want to distill it down, and hopefully we can approach it in like normal crypto terms, like stuff that people are used to hearing, right? So when you talk about the S2 business, what are you actually referring to when we talk about that?
So in general, on really kind of any layer one, if you want to come and build your application on that layer one, they have an interface. So for Ethereum, it's Solidity, right? You hire Solidity developers, and then they have different ways of deploying, and they have test nets that you can work with and everything. So if you want to build an Ethereum application, there's a prescribed kind of set way to build on the Ethereum network. So DevvX is our blockchain. DevvX is comprised, in contrast to a lot of blockchains, comprised of a number of different shards. And each shard has its own blockchain. And so if you want to build on the DevvX blockchain, then in our case, instead of using Solidity, you use just RESTful API commands, HTTP post commands. And so you use an HTTP post command with kind of, wrapped data that's, kind of function arguments. And then you get, a response. And it's just regular kind of Web 2 programming that the regular programming world, is used to. So if you want to build, use a RESTful API. And then what we're going to do is kind of make it where you don't have to worry about what shard you're using unless your business needs its own shard. Then you can kind of get your own shard. But in general, you'll just have an API document. You build your application using those API calls, and you could build a web app interface to it, and just build a really kind of seamless, easy to use, easy to create application. So broadly, it's just the S2 business refers to the business in which other people build on DevvX.
And so to tack onto that a little bit further, there's been a shift or maybe kind of a new innovation on the way that this is going to be, handled on the back end. Can you share a little bit about the API calls and how that's going to work?
Yeah. So just a bit of kind of history on the S2 business. We had looked at it in the past, and I think if you go back, maybe 3 or 4 years, we actually looked pretty seriously at growing the S2 business. And if you look, like there's people who have, on Telegram have said, like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you just make it where everybody could build on your platform, right? And so we looked at it seriously years back, and we actually put an agreement in place with a sales team. And so we were kind of growing it in a traditional, kind of SaaS model, so software as a service model. And we were growing it the way traditional finance businesses grow, because a lot of our experience is in TradFi. So we've always been a company that has kind of one foot in crypto and one foot in TradFi and enterprise. And so the way that you grow a SaaS business a lot of times is, get a sales team, have that sales team go out to enterprises and say, like, here you could have blockchain. It's got immutability, auditability. It's great at tracking assets, right? It's great for multi-party collaboration. And you try to find needs that they have and pitch it to them. And we weren't really successful with that, because a big part of the problem is, like, a SaaS model, a lot of times, again, traditional business, enterprise business, you have these upfront fees, and people have non-recurring engineering NRE expenses. All that goes into kind of commitments they put in to kind of build out a portion of the business that they're going to use on this SaaS platform. And so if you go back 3 or 4 years, one of the problems was the enterprise and traditional finance worlds weren't moving into blockchain yet. So I could almost see where we could even take that, traditional finance model and make it work now, because all of these businesses across the world, across the globe, are now, interested in blockchain that they really weren't before. Like they maybe were kind of testing the water or interested in it conceptually, but didn't really know what they'd want to do. But now they are, right? So now I think is a better time. And that's only been true in the past 6 months, right? I think the world, the traditional finance world has tipped in the direction of blockchain, and now everybody's moving into it. So I think now is a good time to grow our S2 business generally. And I think more likely could have that old model, traditional business model work. But back then it didn't. The other problem back then is, the customers weren't ready. The other problem was, getting somebody to commit to, thousands of dollars per month upfront that you're going to have to be spending, to get your own shard, was a tougher sell. And again, in that environment in particular, was a tougher sell. But in general, it's a tougher sell. It's a tougher sell to get somebody who maybe wants to build a business to commit to big expenses upfront. And it's not the way DeFi works, really. Like the way DeFi works is lots of people creating lots of things, and then you can almost imagine it bubbling. What bubbles up to the top, right? And so all of the big DeFi platforms at some point were just some dudes, or just with an idea, and it's not that expensive to get started, right? A lot of them got funding and really kind of grown, but a lot of the ones that got funding didn't really do something. I think a lot of the successes really were more this smaller groups kind of innovating and seeing what works and taking off. That's a lot of how the startup world works in general, even at a little bit kind of smaller scale. So the kind of light bulb that went off, the innovation that we have that you were referring to in the question, is the idea that instead of having this old SaaS model where you hire a sales team and you go out and you get customers to commit to their own shard, why don't we instead do it the DeFi way, and have each API call, again, these RESTful API calls, HTTP post commands, each one just has a crypto fee associated with it. And people are used to that. That's what they think of with gas, for example. So it's not literally gas, but it's similar in nature. So on the Ethereum network, if you want to use a smart contract, you have to spend some gas, or if you want to just transfer a token, you use some gas. Even Ethereum use gas, right? If you want to transfer Ethereum. So per call that you sign with in our case, ECDSA signature, you sign that transaction, you send it through, and then you just pay a small, gas-like fee. And then that opens up all sorts of new possibilities. So once like I kind of had that thought, like, why don't we do it this way? Then again, the whole world opens up. There's so many different ways that we can grow. So I'm excited about what that particular philosophical change means for us. I think it's going to lead to a lot of growth and a lot more projects being able to come on, test the waters, see how cool it is, see how easy it is to integrate, see how cost effective it is, see how efficient it is, see all the other features that we have that other blockchains don't. And all of those types of things are the things that you need for a platform to really start growing and taking off.
All right. So I want to distill that down a little bit. And I have a feeling we're going to shoot a long video today, Tom. And that's okay. That's okay, because it's a really important topic. So originally it was you were going into places and you were pitching them on blockchains. Let us find your pain points. And, but by the way, there's a fairly substantial financial commitment that comes from you to even venture down this road. Now Right. It's the sort of thing, it's pay as you go, come on and deploy. If you use more, you pay more. If you use less, you pay less. But really what it is the more activity, the better. Right. As long as you're doing something legal, come on, build on the DevvE network, right? That's DevvX, that sort of thing, right?
I think that's a different philosophical change as well, change in mindset. Part of it comes from, the way that the SEC was really pushing, crypto companies down, historically in the past, whereas, the new SEC isn't being so aggressive. Lots of companies were being sued, and you're in a position where you've done everything right. You've done everything that your lawyer said you should do, but now you're going to have to spend a bunch of money, to prove it. And it's very un-American, to be in that kind of situation, right? And so you have to spend a bunch of money to prove that you're doing things right, and you know that you are, you know that if you had that amount of money that you would win. But the problem is they were pushing in ways that a lot of companies just didn't have the money to fight, and they would settle and go out of business. And so it was really like, it was just putting everything, it was so I won't get into kind of the political side of it, but from an entrepreneur's point of view, it was a really tough place to kind of build a business. And so that being in that kind of overall environment also made us really not want to take on liability with what other people are doing on the platform. And we don't want to take liability for what other people are doing on the platform in general. But I think in general, broadly, SaaS companies have solved that problem. And if you're not in a particular segment or market where you're going to be targeted, and instead you're just running a business like everybody else is running businesses, like Salesforce, right, runs a big SaaS business. In general, if you're just running businesses under the regular laws, treated the same way as everybody else, that's a solved problem, right? If somebody uses Salesforce's platform to do something illegal, then Salesforce doesn't get in trouble for it, right? Salesforce has had lawyers. Amazon has had lawyers for their AWS business. Every SaaS business has had their lawyers go through and figure out, these are the terms and conditions that you need to operate on. These protect the company. If somebody's not following, your terms and conditions, then you can kick them off. You reserve the right to kick them off your platform. And there's a balance where you can actually run a business and not take overly significant risk of what other people are doing. And that's just innate in SaaS. And I think crypto now is a point where you could do that. So that's another big difference, I would say, kind of historical, kind of philosophy of what we've had versus now. I'm much more inclined to let people come on and just build whatever on the platform. And again, do things the DeFi way, as long as it's legal, right? So in our terms and conditions, we'll say that it has to be legal. I think one other place that maybe we would push a little bit more than maybe, towards responsibility than some other crypto platforms is, I really see DevvX as the platform of trust and security, right? We have our fraud protections, our theft protections, our private key loss protections, our privacy solution, our bailment solution that protects against, the platform itself, where your assets are held under insured, a bailment system. So in general, if you're building a platform that's developing that reputation and also trying to have a lot of TradFi entities come onto it, you can't have this Wild West, type of mentality. You can't have situations where there's all these rug pulls, and so there's two competing forces there. There's the force that I do want to let people build whatever they want to build and really be able to have innovation and create new ways of doing stuff. I mean, there's so many cool things in the DeFi world that just didn't exist in the TradFi world. And then you see it and it's like, oh, that's a better way to do things, right? So you want to enable that, but you also want to prevent things like rug pulls, and you definitely want to prevent things like, just flat out fraud and, rug pull is fraud, but the shades of gray in that, where it's maybe not a rug pull, but people that really weren't that serious and spent more money on marketing and kind of overextended. So you have to find the right kind of balance against those two competing forces. So that's one other thing that is kind of going into the philosophy of the S2 business. But as a broad statement, outside of really kind of creating that protection, creating that brand around trust, there is that other side of the equation, the other side of the coin, where we do want people to be able to build whatever, and more so than we had been thinking in the past.
Yeah, good deal. And I think it was, man, I should, is his name Paul Atkins, the head of the SEC right now? Is that his name?
Yeah.
He came out with a statement, I think last week, saying we are no longer targeting developers who deploy decentralized applications absent of malicious intent, right? That's it. Like, we're not coming after you anymore, which really does make the US kind of the place to be. Almost like they want homegrown crypto here, which, not mad about it. You thought I thought Portugal was in my future in the past, and now we get to stay home. So all right, with all of that we've got going on, what's the vision? Like, and maybe I know we're going to try and pull Bill on here. I don't want to put Bill on the spot, but hopefully Bill will come on and chat with us a little bit on one of these. But what's the vision from this point forward?
Yeah. So for people's reference, Austin's referring to Bill Anderson. So Bill is DevvE's CTO, and he's the person really running and leading the S2 business. So I think we could probably get Bill to jump on an interview and go through stuff. So the vision of S2 is to have a platform where anybody can build their applications, but also have that platform be the best place for people to build their applications, right? So we want to have across the board the best experience for building applications. So first off, it needs to be easy to build on, right? So there's across the world on the order of 250,000 Solidity developers that can build on Ethereum, right? So if you want to build an Ethereum application, you got to go out and you got to hire those developers. In contrast, there's 25 million web developers that can build on our platform that are just used to regular Web 2 applications. So a good example of that is we brought in the former head of the Amazon Kindle project, reported directly to Jeff Bezos. He built a global marketplace, the Kindle marketplace. And we brought him in to build our marketplace. And so he had no Web3 experience, no blockchain experience. And then he created a team that also had no Web3 experience. Not one of his team members had ever worked with Solidity or knew anything about developing on any blockchain, any layer one at all. They were just regular web developers. And so they came on and built not only our marketplace, the glassblock.io marketplace, but they built our wallet application as well. And then later that turned into our public blockchain explorer. So all of the core pieces of a blockchain were built by Web 2 guys, right? Rather than Web 3 people, right? And so in general, that ease of integration, ease of use, especially for traditional finance or enterprise companies, and this is important even if you're not a traditional finance or enterprise, like if you're just a crypto person wanting to get into it, having a platform that's well suited to those bigger companies and letting them build on it means that you could end up with big applications, big customers, and big customer bases driving things, which is a good platform to get in on early. So that ease of integration, whether you're kind of a small 1 or 2-3 person shop all the way up to a big enterprise, that ease of integration is a really important concept. It makes it cheaper and easier to hire people to work on it as well. Then another thing you look on a platform, is it going to scale? Is it going to be cost effective? So it's going to be very inexpensive compared to other blockchains, and then you're able to scale as big as you need. And one of the things that's compelling about our blockchain versus others is if you start getting big enough that you're taking a material percentage of the blockchain. In our case, you could take your application then and move it over to your own blockchain, so your own shard, and the shards can communicate with each other. So you don't really lose anything, but it just makes it it's an architectural strategy that lets you scale better. And then the other thing is you're gonna say, well, why would I, build on that platform versus, Ethereum or other platforms, right? So a good answer to that is cost and speed. A good answer to that is the ease of integration. But then we also have other features that other blockchains don't, right? So I've described, on other calls that you and I have spoken, we spoke to DevvX, for example. DevvX gave us a list of all the problems that they have as a traditional finance entity getting into the blockchain space. And so we have innate technology on our platform that checked off all of those boxes for DevvX that lets them get on to the platform. So again, even if those aren't checkboxes that directly affect your business, they're checkboxes that affect enterprise and TradFi that want to get onto a blockchain. So again, it's a good platform to get on early because we check the boxes. We uniquely check the boxes that traditional finance needs to get on, right? And then we've also got our own partnerships and our own plans of what we're building that it also makes our platform appealing to start to build ecosystem around. And so if you have the only platform that has private key loss protections, right, like that's pretty compelling, right? A lot of people are going to want to build on that platform. If you're the only platform that has a really kind of well thought out, theft protection system that ties in with the lending platform that we've already created. That's really compelling as well. So I think once the S2 business comes out, people start seeing all of its capabilities, the ease of integration, cost effectiveness, high speed, and then all of the specific features that exist on our platform that don't exist on others. I think people are going to start to say that this is a platform to build on. And then I think another thing that could happen, I think it will happen, is that there's a lot of companies and products that have built their own applications across DeFi, right? And they've tied in with a number of layer ones, right? So you have a like a DEX that works across a lot of different DEXs on other layer ones. Well, they could take that platform and with a pretty small amount of effort, given the RESTful API, tie into our system as well. And so I think when you're building an ecosystem the way that we are, and you're making it easy to integrate with, I think if you tried to do that 7 years ago, there wasn't as much broad infrastructure as there is now. And then with the RESTful API, a lot of that broad infrastructure can quickly get onto our platform. And I think what will happen is, people start building applications and they're like, oh, well, we need on and off ramps. Well, some other company that's built on and off ramps can tie into our system really easily. Oh, we need, DEX integrations. We need access to certain types of assets. We need the ability to create, real world assets. All those things that all these other companies have been doing will find that DevvX is a very easy and cost-effective and straightforward, bridge to put on. And if it's growing and more people are using it and it's got, real good momentum, there'll be more incentive and the whole thing, can really snowball. So the vision is to become the place to build as the traditional finance world moves into blockchain in particular, I guess I'd say.
Man, there was so much there, but so I was smiling throughout, everything you were just saying, because I was calling back on an experience a couple of years ago. I wanted to deploy a project with a couple of friends of mine, and I interviewed a number of Solidity developers. And the cost, they're hard to find, right? Solidity developers are not easy to come across. If you actually do, it is so incredibly cost prohibitive to find a good team to build out a dApp for you. And then on top of that, you have to get it audited, because I don't understand what any of that crap is. And that audit in and of itself is going to be another 10, 20 grand, right? So I was just kind of thinking, wow, what if you could go to, freelancer.com, or the developer who I already have on staff who works on my WordPress sites can completely code on chain. Like, that is mind blowing to me.
That's huge. That's exactly it. And then even after you go through that hassle and you audit it, there's still hacks. Like we run into a couple hacks ourselves, and we had professional, good firms that seemed, like they really knew their stuff. And then hacks still happen, Mm-hmm. And so writing in Solidity is just such a hard. It's just that's one of my biggest criticisms of Ethereum broadly is it's almost impossible to build at scale and assure security. Whereas our overall architecture lets people build easily and quickly, but it's also a much more constrained, kind of environment from a security perspective. You could do everything you need to do from the application's point of view, but you're not just writing code from scratch. And even some of these Ethereum, projects that Ethereum's been around for 7 years, 8 years, even some of those that, I guess a little longer, even some of those that have been around, like specific bits of software that have been hardened, there's eventually it feels like there's they figure out something and find some kind of way to hack it. And so the realm that we're in is a much more robustly tested and architected type of security environment. I think part of the way I think about it is like when the iPhone first came out and it had iOS and it was built around security. I saw a lot of people in the security industry saying this is one of the biggest events we've had from a security perspective in computing, right? You have Windows that everybody had largely been using up to that point, even Macs to a large extent, and there's all sorts of viruses and and ways to kind of hack and take over your computer. And iOS really designed architecture built around security. And so I think of DevvX as that really kind of critical, important piece that ultimately it's not what Apple touted, but they knew what they were doing, and it's part of what ultimately let people, like, I feel much safer on my phone than I do my iPhone than I do any other, kind of computing platform that I'm on. So I think DevvX will be similar as well. So one of the things I think broadly that, again, this overall platform of trust, security is going to be a big part of it. And people that are building through a RESTful API and can use kind of traditional, tried and true and proven ways of managing security, that's going to be a huge boon as well. So.
Question for you, Tom. So I know, obviously, and they play a huge role in DeFi, but Chainlink is such a mainstay in the Oracle department, which for anyone that doesn't know, Oracle's essentially are just truth-based price feeds or information feeds. But there's been a number of like fairly innovative exploits that have happened where bad actors have, manipulated a price, let's say, of a low liquidity token on a centralized exchange to manipulate the price feed through Chainlink. And now all of a sudden they're taking huge loans against, a company that's allowing that token. With our RESTful API, we can have price feeds that other blockchains are just not going to have access to, correct? Just
right.
Based on that fact alone.
Yeah, that's part of what I was getting at, is that attack vector is not a crypto attack vector; it's a broad attack vector, right? And so the types of kind of security interfaces that you put on when you have a RESTful API and you're building around that, again, puts you into a much more tried and true and tested and thoroughly robust kind of area. So you could put a Cloudflare type of front end over your application, and you can tie into feeds. So oracles are just ways that you get external data not on the blockchain fed into the blockchain, and that does create a attack vector. But that, again, manipulating data in that way, that's a risk across any Web 2 application as well. But Web 2 has had 30 years of kind of isolating, figuring out how to solve those problems. So from a security perspective, our platform and the interfaces into it are much more of a traditional security platform. But then underneath that kind of traditional security, right, again, you maybe put a Cloudflare type of front end onto it that stops a lot of attacks coming in before they really can be effective. And so underneath it, then you also have all of the power of blockchain, right? You have multiple validators that's Byzantine fault tolerant. You have an immutable auditable chain, and you could have, in our case, what we call verification nodes that maintain an entire copy of the chain, which is used for things like our bailment solution, things like that. So you have other bits of security that traditional systems don't have. When you have an immutable auditable chain and you have Byzantine fault tolerance as the underlying infrastructure, then you have kind of the best of both worlds. You have new forms of architectural security underlying, kind of tried and true existing security. So
I love it. I used to do a daily news show in a different life, but I did. And we used to joke all the time that the great thing about crypto is you can be a guy in your mom's basement and deploy a dApp and you could be a millionaire overnight. But what ended up happening over time was the barrier to entry did get big. And with how much blockchain is blowing up, I can just see that there's so many people out there who feel that barrier to entry, but they have traditional Web 2 coding experience or people within their sphere they can work with.
I love that statement. Yeah, that's really insightful. That's a really insightful comment. So I think as the world moves so like I said, the business world has tipped in that the business world is moving towards crypto. So you saw Circle's IPO, you see everything that BlackRock is doing. Now you're seeing everything that all of the other Fortune 500 companies are doing. There's like announcements, it feels like every week, of what big companies are doing. You see stablecoin regulation in the US is moving forward. And what that's going to mean is that payments, for business to business infrastructure and supply chain and things like that are all going to move towards stablecoins. That's inevitable. Like, that's going to happen. It's going to happen pretty quick. But that means that if you're a business, you're going to have assets that are crypto assets that are held by private keys. at a minimum, you're just going to have to pay your bills and your supply chain with crypto, with stable coins, right? And so there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that that's going to happen. And I think it's going to happen very, very quickly at this point because the world is tipping. So with the whole world now moving towards crypto and more comfort with the space, and then the space is going to grow up as well. It's not going to be as Wild West, and the space is going to have to mature as well. All that's going to happen at the same time. You made an excellent point just now. There's going to be all sorts of entrepreneurs that didn't want to get into crypto. And I've had these conversations with these kinds of people, because I go to the regular business meetings and they're like, oh, you're in crypto, like they're looking down the nose at me, that kind of thing. And it's like, well, I'm an enterprise blockchain, but yeah, but all those people now are going to start to say, oh, this is a hot new area. And you're exactly right. They're not going to want to program in Solidity. They're not going to want to hire Solidity developers. And if there's a blockchain that lets all of these new entrepreneurs, that the floodgates are opening and they can start getting in, that you can use a RESTful API, I think that's going to be huge. So part of what I've been thinking is exciting is we're doing things a little bit more the crypto way, per API, small fees that are akin to gas. And I think that could bring in a lot of crypto platforms and crypto people. But you're exactly right. Lots of traditional entrepreneurs that have been scared or intimidated by the space now are going to see it as a place everybody's going, and a platform that's tailored to kind of their desires and needs, really could thrive now as well. So that's a great example of where S2 is, could become the platform to build on.
Absolutely beautiful. All right. So we are over the 30-minute mark at this point, and we've touched on a lot of stuff, but I know we kind of went down some rabbit holes too. Was there anything that we haven't talked about that you really just wanted to tap into? Hopefully we gave people a really good vision of kind of what this is going to look like, but.
Yeah, I think there's room to go into more details. People might have questions they can ask on Telegram. We could answer there. I guess one other update is just kind of timing. And so we put out on the roadmap that the S2 business would be getting going and the public shard would be out in Q3, and we're in Q3, but we're midway through it, and so that's still the plan. Everything seems on track to get the S2 business out in Q3, so that's exciting. I'm also excited at what the S2 business kind of means to our ecosystem in the short term. A lot of the projects and conversations and business development we've been having broadly relates to entities that then can build on S2. So now that we're getting S2 out and really kind of focused on putting it out in a way that people can start to grow, there's more things that we're going to be able to announce now in a kind of meaningful way. So I think that's exciting. I think as it comes out, a little bit more just in terms of timing and the overall kind of progression is we'll start out with a test shard that people can, just jump in, see the API, and start building their own applications on, but it'll be a test net. While people start building applications, in parallel to that, we're going to start finalizing all of kind of the final infrastructure and plans of how to let people take it to mainnet and really turn it into production software. And so everybody will be able to do that. And that it'll take people some time to once they're using the testnet to actually build their application. And during that time, in parallel, we'll finalize getting things ready. But pretty quickly, we'll be able to have where people could deploy on mainnet. So we're not far from that as well. So that's kind of the overall progression. So I think pretty soon, still this quarter, hopefully sooner than later in the quarter, everybody will start being able to play with it and then deploy on it, pretty quickly after that. And then I think there's some announcements that we've even lined up of, entities that we already know are wanting to build on it. And then again, what I'd like to see is that the whole thing snowballs and more people find out about it, find the characteristics fit what suits them best. Don't have to go hire Solidity developers, just use my existing team like that. That would be amazing for a lot of, groups. And then I think, again, the whole thing could just explode, because if you start getting where everybody can kind of build missing pieces, and then they see opportunity, and this is getting built, but it needs this, and somebody puts that piece in, and then that piece needs this piece. You can see lots of different groups just filling out the whole ecosystem. And then once you get that, then it's more robust, more throughput, more flow, more liquidity, and again, it can snowball. So that's hopefully where it all goes.
Heck yeah. I mean, just for myself, and I know people haven't necessarily seen this in action yet, but I am so excited for the public network. Like, for people to be able to build, touch, feel, it just makes, from what I'm guessing, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be true, it's going to make everything else we want to do that much smoother. It's just going to get us out there. So awesome. Thanks for rapping with me today, Tom. Hopefully we can get Bill on. That would be great. I'd love to chat with him. So,
okay, great.
All
awesome.
right.
All right.
Let's get out of here. Thanks for tuning in, guys. My name's Austin. I'll catch you on the next roundup. Take care. Bye-bye.